Is it an epic or epic failure? The Big Review. Movies, games, and TV in focus.
Pulse95.
If there is something you should know about Mikail and I, besides the fact that we're massive MCU and Marvel fans and we like making fun of each other, besides that, all of that, we are massive Wes Anderson fans, especially Mikail in particular. So when I texted him, Mikail, we have to review The French Dispatch. He's like, it is out? I was like, yes, it's out. And apparently it had a limited release in the UAE and it continues to have a limited release, which is probably the reason why you might have not seen any banners or any posters around. But the movie basically is a typical Wes Anderson movie that is about a French, actually an American magazine set in the town of Ennui in France called The French Dispatch, and the story follows the authors or the writers of the newspaper as they basically tell us some very interesting stories that have recently written.
Yeah, and like I usually said, it's a collection of these stories of these journalists who are trying to publish for this American magazine in this fictional French town. And okay, you think, this is just something ordinary, but it's in those stories that we see some of the most bizarre, extraordinary, sophisticated type of type of scenarios that take place. It's almost like these journalists had an intention to report maybe a particular event or do a regular review, but it's the world around them that doesn't allow them to just tell a regular story. It's the events themselves that unfold and just become extraordinary and just it's just so energetic and full of life. It's crazy.
Mikail is basically having his own fangirl moment right now. And honestly, if you walk into a Wes Anderson movie and you think, it's going to be ordinary, then you've never watched a Wes Anderson movie, because it never is ever ordinary. Back in 2019, when we were talking about the cast and whatnot, if you remember, there were so many big names. There's obviously Bill Murray, who plays Arthur Howitzer Jr., the editor of the French Dispatch. You've got Owen Wilson, Elizabeth Mott, you've got Jason Schwartzman, Tilda Swinton, Benicio del Toro, Adrian Brody. Basically, I can go on and on and on with the amount of names. Timothy Chalamet, Lee Seydoux. So off of the bat, so many big names. Atiyeh somehow manages to fit in every single story.
Oh, yeah.
Now, here's the thing. Again, it is broken into chapters. The movie starts out with first of all, reminder, spoiler free, so do not worry.
Yep.
We're not going to ruin the movie. Back to how it's broken up. First of all, it's broken up into sort of an introduction of who is the newspaper owner and how did the newspaper come to be, because it is basically based on a small column basically part of a newspaper all the way in Liberty, Kansas. And the son of the owner of the newspaper kind of goes to Ennui in France and basically goes like, let me start my own newspaper, kind of talk about the things that are happening in France and report it all the way to Kansas. The next one is by one of the writers. His name is J.K.L. Berenson. Her name is J.K.L. Berenson. And then we have another one by another writer, Lucinda Cremant, and finally by Roebuck Wright. And every single one is a whole story that, in a way, feels like mini movies within the big movie.
Yeah, I will give you a warning that the film almost doesn't even, because it's just so stylized and it's fast paced in nature. It's chaotic. So there'll be times it's like, wait, what story are we in now? Wait, weren't we just focusing on this journalist or the publication company? No, we go into these events and it becomes like intriguingly complex. So there are almost like layers to the story where they're talking maybe about a particular character, but then another character steps in, they give them a little bit of subplot explanation before we go back to the story that's being reported by the journalist. And that's what I love about it, because it's, like you said, it's chaotic. Everything is asymmetrical. Nothing is in order,
but it is at the same time, honestly.
It can be, because sometimes they jump all the way back in time.
Honestly, I think it's you're absolutely correct with some stories.
Yeah.
That is exactly what happens. And it goes back to the fact that we're getting different POVs. every single time. We need to remember that this is a newspaper. It's a story within a newspaper, which basically means that you should also regard it as if somebody's narrating an article to you rather than somebody narrating a story. Because there's a massive difference between listening to a story, whether it's visually or through, auditory means, versus sitting down and reading a whole article.
Yeah.
So this is something very important to take into consideration, because that is exactly what Wes Anderson is doing. He took it in a way where he's adapting a written story visually, but he's not adapting it either. He's like, you keep up, you pretend as if you are reading it along with us.
And to some people that may be very off-putting, but honestly, as a fan of Wes Anderson, I like the challenge, of trying to keep up with the pacing of the story, despite how sometimes it can be asymmetrical, and it's like, and you're almost playing catch up with it. And I don't know why, but I just found that really fun, just trying to piece everything all together, and then as you get to almost, this is going to be the climax of the story, and it's like, I kind of get it now, and I'm ready for the next story,
Exactly. We're ready for the continuation of this review. We're going to be taking a very quick break, and we're going to continue our discussion on the French Dispatch, spoiler free as usual. Text us 4215 Etisalat Urdu if you've watched the movie and join in the conversation.
Pulse 95.
We continue our review of the French Dispatch. We're talking about how the movie is linear but non-linear at the same time. It is chaotic, but it's necessarily chaotic. And it covers 3 stories that are being basically narrated by the 3 authors or writers of the French Dispatch, the newspaper. I kept telling Mikail that, one, to basically pay attention to the chaos and the reason why it's chaotic, which is a big thing when you're watching it, because I think at some point my friends and I did feel like it's a little bit too much, and it might have been, I wouldn't say boring, but it was so overwhelming I kind of felt sleepy, and we all agreed. I'm like, you felt sleepy? They're like, yeah, I felt sleepy. Did you? And I'm like, yeah, I did feel sleepy.
Yeah.
But again, it's not due to boredom. It's just sometimes it's an overwhelming amount of information, which is one of the few times I'm like, actually one of the many times I'm like, I wish there was English subtitles to follow, because I was a little bit behind because they were just talking way too fast. Thank God for Arabic subtitles, because it honestly helped me and saved my time. But can we also talk about the small subtleties of a Wes Anderson movie?
Yeah.
Starting with the point that you made about black and white versus color. And when I was telling you about the names of the towns and also the names of the cafe, the small names here and there.
Yeah, one thing I know with Wes Anderson, if I maybe didn't catch it, or I never understood what that scene was about, I know everything has an artistic deliberation to it.
Yeah.
Every set, every production design is meticulously crafted to emphasize maybe a certain feeling or a theme or a moment in that story. And I didn't mind that sometimes I didn't understand what was going on, because like you said, it's there's this like audio visual stimulation that's just it's constantly rushing you, and you as a viewer, you're demanding, please slow down, but
it's overstimulating.
Yeah.
It's very interesting again. And guys, you just need to look carefully at those small things. That's the thing. That's an added layer to one. I need to pay attention to the stories of like 5 different people. That's happening within one story, within one storyline, and then to add to it, I am literally Googling stuff in French, like on Google Translate. I'm like, I know this cafe has a weird name, and it has to be something. And I looked it up, and it means no kidding, which is very funny, and also concerns the entire story. Same goes for the town of Ennui. I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of that word before, because it's an actual word. Just because it sounds French, it's not actually French. And even the town of Liberty, Kansas, very interesting. And what I love about this, I'd say, have to say, in a way to wrap this part up, is that, and I told this to Mikail as well, and that is, somehow all the main characters are not main characters.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the main character is the person who appeared the least
the journalists
on
themselves.
screen.
Yeah.
not the journalist himself, the editor.
The editor-in-chief, yeah, because he makes the final call in these stories.
And it just tells you about the intricacies also of writing in a newspaper and whatnot. So I love that. It's quite insane, which brings me to my final verdict that I enjoyed it, I loved it, but I still give it an 8 out of 10.
I have come also to the conclusion that I'm gonna give The French Dispatch an 8 out of 10. It is impressively stylized, it's sophisticated, has this wonderful aftertaste when you watch it. It's rich, but its fast-paced nature could be so off-putting to most viewers. But I think if you get the chance to watch it again and maybe over and over, you appreciate it a lot more. And so my final verdict for this film will be 8 out of 10.
There you go, guys. This is our review and our score of The French Dispatch. Go check it out. It's by Wes Anderson. If you had watched any Wes Anderson movies, you know how important and interesting this director is and vital he is to cinema. Coming up next, we're going to be taking a short break and talking about a celebration, an interesting one that I don't think we've celebrated before.
I don't think so.
Me neither. Yeah. So it's very important that we do. Coming up next, right here on the Afternoon Karak.
If you liked this episode of Afternoon Karak, drop a like and subscribe.
Pulse95.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram for all our daily updates and top stories.